right, so I finally want to get around to giving you guys an illustration on mixing color in a very tight value and color range. I've been meaning to do this for a while, but I wanted to have access to my studio palette. Now, I don't have a lot of paint out right now because I was just putting enough out to do some glazing and signing of paintings. But generally, like, let me grab this painting so you can see it. In a piece like this that I showed you the other day, can you see that? Kind of getting a glare on it. You can kind of get an idea. So what I'm going to do is mix from one of those darker grays and bring the value up. The general process for me anyway. So what I tend to do is start with a darker blue because it's an overall fairly cool gray in that scene. And because there's a lot of green in there because of the plant life, I'll use a yellow ochre. You can see I just put a little bit of that in there. That's obviously way too dark. So I'm going to put a little white in to bring it up. But you can see it's already going to the green side, but it's staying neutral and in a very close value range. Okay. So I generally, when I'm doing this, mix a little more paint because I know I'm going to be adjusting this pretty much off the entire canvas. But again, you can see you get a nice neutral green there. Now, if I want to amp that up faster, I can introduce one of the more saturated cadmium yellows. But be careful because those will pick up on you very quickly. Now, off this mixture, I'm going to begin to lighten it up this way. I might even go into my cobalt blue now. You can see how that's slightly cooler there. And what I'm doing, folks, is I'm judging right here, these colors right next to one another, which is what we do once we get that color on the canvas. Like I said in that video the other day, this is all theory right here. It doesn't mean anything until I put that stroke on the canvas and then another one next to it, next to it, next to it. And then I can judge value and color relationships off of that. But you can see you can begin to lighten that with the cad white. Or I'm sorry, the titanium white, and then I'm using the cobalt blue to bring a little more richness into it. Now I'm going to watch that closely. If it gets too rich, I might just put just a touch of burnt sienna into that to gray it back. So again, burnt sienna is nothing more than a burnt orange. So mixing that with the blue, you're mixing complements to gray. And I find that I tend to get richer, more interesting grays that way. So then I just begin to slowly bring the key up. And if I want color saturated in those far blues, I'll start introducing a cooler blue, which is the cobalt. And you see how you can begin to really get the illusion of depth. If you really want to bring in a richer blue, you can go into one of the synthetics, but be careful because they'll take over very quickly. So you see from a value standpoint, dark to light. You see from a color standpoint, a warm, sort of neutral green, or cool if you want it, off to a cool, okay? Now off that same mixture, if you want to start really pumping up some color in some of those lighter lights of green, you can begin doing that, like I said, with the cad lemon or even a phthalo yellow green. Folks, are you watching how little color I'm mixing into this off this pile? That's how you keep it close and tight. That's how you create that illusion of atmospheric perspective, you know, thick coastal air, for instance. And like I say, you're making your judgments right here. Where you can really relate one to the other. If you want to go a little warmer, you can. If you really want to bump it up, you can do that with the Viridian hue. Be careful it doesn't get too rich. If you have to knock it back down, introduce a little bit more of that ultramarine in there and maybe some yellow ochre. And you see that these are all fairly close in value, particularly these and these. These suggest sunlight, these suggest distant. But it all starts with this base darker color. And make sure you get enough paint out there that you can really take care of these mixtures. If you're just using thin little washes, it'll never work. That paint has to have some body to it. Can you see that? so that once you lay it on the canvas, you can cover some ground and leave some textural passages if you want. But again, I start with this main pool color, which was right here, and then I mix off in different directions, and I try to stay clean with my brush. If I have to pull out another brush, I will, but you'll notice that this is all close enough, I'm going to clean that off, in value and color that I can pretty much do it with the same brush. I can even go into some really rich blues off here, even introduce some phthalo if I want, and it will still sit within that mass if you squint your eyes, if you don't go too rich. If you get too saturated with that color, it won't harmonize with everything else. So again, you can always knock that back a little bit with some of that yellow ochre or the burnt sienna, depending on which way you want to go. One will give you more of a green and one will give you more of a gray. But start with that first mixture, get a good pile of paint going there, and just slowly add, a pinhead size amount of paint into that mixture to keep it tight. And as you move away from that, be very gradual. Oftentimes what I'll do, and I didn't say this in the video the other day, is I'll taper these colors down. And what that allows me to do is, instead of going into that whole mixture of, say, alizarin crimson there and pulling it down, contaminating that almost the whole pile, I can just go and take a little bit off of that edge to gray the color. See how little that took just to knock that back? So you might taper those piles in a little bit so you don't contaminate as much paint. You have a little more control over what you're doing. But that's pretty much what I do when I'm dealing with atmospheric perspective. I identify the main base color, the value of that color. I get it as accurately as possible here, and then I start mixing off of that. And of course, once you put it up on the canvas, you begin to really fine tune and see, okay, this needs to be a little warmer. This needs to be a little more to the green side, maybe the cool or warm, maybe rich or gray. Just depends on what you're trying to say, but you can make those adjustments and make those calls real time.
Hi, my name is Matt Smith. One of the primary goals of this online course is to give folks the opportunity to study with me for a full year at their convenience, on their own time frame. It's not always easy to block out a week or more of time to travel to a distant location for the purpose of studying with an artist of choice. Allowing oneself to study as their schedule permits creates a more relaxed atmosphere, which in turn opens the mind to learning. This is an opportunity I really wish I had in my early years. The course begins with an introductory module covering the basic consideration of tools, equipment, studio arrangement, lighting, the importance of indoor versus outdoor time, photography as a tool, and much more. This first module will set the tone for the remaining modules, which will dive more deeply into the basics of drawing, value, design, and color. In the remaining 4 modules, I'll discuss why these basics are important, how to identify them, and in return, how to use them not only to analyze your chosen subject, but how to use them to create a blueprint for building your painting. It is so important to train your mind to see and think as an artist rather than someone who just documents what's in front of them. The way to do this is by understanding these fundamentals and applying them to the subject at hand. In other words, see by way of the basics, line, shape, value, etc., rather than all the physical components that make up the finished scene, like twigs, pebbles, and leaves. I'll then reinforce these concepts with both unedited visuals, photographs, and finished paintings that support the idea at hand. I'll then complete a demo of a subject that represents the particular fundamental addressed in each module. I'll also include a variety of photographic images for student use. Participants will also have access to me throughout the year by way of a private Facebook group. You'll be able to contact me with questions related to areas of difficulty or whatever you may be working on and want to discuss. This one-on-one time is where we can really fine-tune areas of interest for you. Thank you, and I really hope you can join me.